Fleeced Chapter 13. Stone the Crows. Museums, like elephants, wake up slowly in the mornings. Next morning, as the heating and plumbing wheezed into life, the museums that is, not the elephants, although if it's an old elephant it could be both, the night guard switched off the intruder alarms, brewed their morning mugs of tea and unlocked the doors to the cleaners waiting outside. It was behind just such a small army of men and women struggling with bags of overalls, polish and rubber gloves that Rose walked in. Behind her, at the foot of the steps, her mother's car zoomed off, heading in the direction of the airport and Athens to visit Professor Papadakis, the caveated expert. She left Rose with a kiss, a banana and strict instructions to go straight to her friend Lucy's house that evening, as she, her mother, wouldn't be back till tomorrow night. Suiting Rose perfectly, since, despite telling Mum all about it, she still hadn't remembered Lucy was on holiday with her family in Lanzarote until the following Tuesday. Rose hitched her rucksack onto her back and walked across the museum's great hall, its white floor bright with sunshine streaming through its vast glass ceiling. She knew she ought to feel relieved about Professor Papadakis fixing the caveated it, because it would mean that the portal was in place and Alex and Aries could go home again. But another part of her hoped it wouldn't be too soon. After all, it had been a long time since Rose had felt so excited or useful about anything, or had real company. She walked past a couple of guards scratching their heads over a collapsed dummy in the Tudor collection and turned towards the Lost Property office on the western side of the museum. Her footsteps echoed along the empty corridors and up the short flight of steps to the little office stuffed full of lost things that the attendants found scattered every day around its halls and corridors. Checking first that no one was around, Rose stepped inside and worked quickly. A few minutes later, she had found a navy blue jumper, a white t-shirt and a pair of boys' jeans. How someone had managed to walk out into the middle of London without their jeans on puzzled her until she noticed the price tag still hanging off them. She held them up in front of her. They looked about right for Alex and would certainly help him blend in when they left the museum. Rose stuffed them into her rucksack, hurried out of the office and made her way to the basement. She knocked lightly on the storeroom door and stepped inside to find Alex and Aries arguing about something. "But I liked it," Aries was saying. "That's hardly the point," replied Alex, his arms folded tightly over his chest. "Hello?" said Rose. "Something wrong?" Alex turned and smiled quickly. Only that Aries took himself on a midnight tour of the museum last night and went to bed in some fancy dress. "On it," corrected Aries, "not in it." "You were supposed to stay here," said Rose, beginning to wonder what the security cameras had picked up. Aries sniffed and stared up at the ceiling. "Luckily I found him before the doors opened," said Alex, "so I suppose there's no harm done." "Hardly," thought Rose, remembering the guards she'd walked past, wondering if they might at this discovering where Alex and Aries were hiding. Realising that she needed to delete whatever was recorded before they checked, she hastily unbuckled her rucksack and pulled out the clothes from the Lost Property office. "Put these on," she said, handing them to Alex. "I have to nip upstairs a minute." Alex examined the jeans and frowned. "They're like yours," he said suspiciously. "I don't want to wear girl things." "They're jeans," she replied patiently, or as patiently as she could manage, talking to a boy in a Greek tunic that looked like a mini-dress. "And everyone here wears them?" "Xeres of Persia wore trousers," muttered Aries, "and a right Berkey looked in them too. Not that anyone mentioned it to his face, of course, not of his being so handy with a sword." "Look," said Rose, walking quickly towards the door and glancing back at Alex. "Just change into them, okay? It'll make life a lot easier." "And what about me?" sniffed Aries sniffily. "What am I supposed to wear?" "I'm still thinking of something for you," said Rose. "Something in gold," said Aries as she stepped out into the corridor. "It is my best colour, you know." Rose hurried back the way she had come to the security office, located at the museum's front entrance. It was a small glass-fronted room set behind a counter, which doubled as an information point during the daytime. Now, glancing through its window, she was relieved to see that no one had checked the surveillance footage because the monitors were still showing live views of the exhibition rooms. She tapped in the room's security code and stepped inside. Half a minute later, she'd wiped the night's recordings and was just about to stand up and leave when a sudden rapping on the glass startled her. Twisting round, she saw a sharp-featured old woman wearing strange black-rimmed glasses with lenses shaped like lemons. Her grey hair was pulled tightly back off her face into a bun and bundled up in a thick black cape, far too warm for the summer. She reminded Rose of an old-fashioned nanny, a particularly stern and short-tempered one. Rose stood up, wondering how the woman had even managed to get in since the museum didn't open to the public until 10, and walked over to the glass opening the panel. "Can I help you?" Twitching, the woman craned her neck forwards, revealing a wattle of yellowed skin beneath her chin. "I need to see the museum director," she said, her voice low and croaking. "She's on holiday," Rose said. "My mum said—" "Your mother?" The woman tipped her head to one side and regarded Rose with cold, glittering eyes. "Yes," Rose went on, feeling her smile slip as a sour smell wafted through into the small office. "She works here. Dr. Pottersby Weir. She's an archaeologist. Anyway, she says that Mr. Roper, the chief curator, is in charge now." "And when is Mr. Roper in?" "About 9:30 usually. Shall I give him a message to you?" "Tell him," the woman bustled her shoulders, "that I'm calling about the sheep-related incident yesterday." She jerked her head to the other side. "I am Ms. de Munter from the Department of Art, Culture and Ruminants." "Culture and Ruminants?" said Rose uneasily, because even though she hardly knew anything about politics, she was sure that the Department of Arts and Culture didn't have any special departments for sheep. "This museum was a laughingstock yesterday," said Ms. de Mentor, leaning towards the class, "and it can't be allowed to happen again. Sheep's cud will stain marble permanently, you know, or stray boluses of food are worse than dried bubblegum to shift, and don't get me started on what a sheep's other end can do." "I wasn't going to," said Rose, feeling her nose tingle. The mouldy smell was getting stronger now, and for some reason reminded her of the school's butchery cage when it needed cleaning. "My department requires me to track down the sheep," added Miss de Mentor. "Ram," said Rose. The woman drew her red lips into a tight line. "And the boy. He, in particular, needs to be dealt with." "Look, I'm sure it won't happen again," said Rose quickly. "The ram was just frightened, you know, being a long way from home." The woman arched an eyebrow suspiciously. "And how would you know that?" Rose swallowed. I'm just guessing, you know, a ram turning up in the middle of London." Mr. Mentor smiled cheerlessly and glanced over at the wooden chairs and tables of the museum cafe. "I shall wait over there," she said crisply, "and I shall not be leaving. Make sure that you let the chief curator know." Rose waited until the woman had stalked away. Then, horribly unsettled, she let herself out of the office and hurried back across the great hall and through the door to the basement stairs, unable to shake off the sensation of being watched until she stepped back into the storeroom. Inside, Alex was stretching out his arms either side until his hands appeared at the end of the jumper sleeves. "I've just met the strangest woman," said Rose, closing the door quickly behind her. "Says she wants to see the director. Something about improving security against ruminants." "Charming," muttered Aries, about to add something else when the door slammed loudly against the back wall. Rose spun round to see Miss de Mentor filling the doorway. "You can't," squeaked Rose as Miss de Mentor shoved her out the way and marched into the room. Kyrios Marlos," she rasped, her head jutting forwards on its twin-stalkered neck. "So this is where you've been hiding." Alex stepped out in front of Aries and the woman's shadow fell across them both. Winded, Rose stared at the woman's back. Were Rose's eyes playing tricks on her, or was Miss de Mentor really getting bigger? Her shoulders seemed to be straining against her cape, whilst her chest looked as though it was inflating, puffing up like a balloon. When her cape button popped off and skittered across the floor, Rose knew she was right, but still gasped as a ring of black splintery feathers sprung out from Miss de Mentor's neck. "Harpy!" gasped Alex, his eyes growing wide. With a quick shake, the harpy flung her cloak away and stepped out of her skirt and boots to reveal the body of a monstrous bird, thick and bulbous and covered with oily black plumage. A tatter of down stuck out above spindly grey legs, ending in wrinkled bird feet with sharp yellow talons. The smell of old birdcage that Rose had noticed upstairs was now overwhelming, filling the room with a sickening stench. The harpy rustled her feathers, drawing her jagged wings together so that they jutted out above her head, craned forwards and glowered at Alex and Aries. My mistress wishes to see you," she said. Throwing back her head, she cawed, piercing the air with a metallic, unearthly screech. "Aries!" shouted Alex, his hastily pale, behind his tanned skin. "Run!" As Aries scrambled away, clattering down the narrow gap left at the ends of the shelves, Miss de Mentor flicked open her wings. They made a sound like an old umbrella opening and sent pots and vases crashing onto the floor. Lurching towards Alex, arching over him, her wings brushed the ceiling, but he didn't run. Rose gasped as he vanished behind a greasy wall of black feathers. Then there was a thumping sound like someone hitting an overstuffed pillow, and the harpy doubled over, spluttering. Alex, you see, knew a thing or two about harpies. You can't not when you have to step into their aviary to feed them 3 times a week. And what he knew was that they had a weakness. If you could get close enough to avoid their vicious beak and not be shredded by their savage claws or blinded by their feathers, their neck was soft, exposed and vulnerable, just like a vulture's. Alex drew back his fist again. Sidestepping quickly, he landed a second punch at her gasping throat. Desperate to help, Rose picked up the nearest thing to hand, which happened to be her rucksack, and began thumping Miss Demento across the back with it. Jerking upright, the bird woman looked over her shoulder, cawing furiously, her thin black tongue rippling inside her beak. Her eyes glittered with hatred. Her hair fell loose from its tight bun, tumbling into a greasy straggle over her shoulders. Rose trembled, drawing away as the harpy jerked forwards and sliced Rose's cheek with the tip of her wing. Rose yelped and stepped back, reaching for her face, sensing the blood trickle down between her fingers. Turning back, the harpy cawed viciously, swinging her head from side to side like a T-Rex. She didn't see Alex until it was too late. Crouched down, he seized the harpy's ankles and yanked hard, sending the harpy over backwards. Yay, Alex! As she slammed down onto the floor, air exploded from her lungs. Impressed, Rose jumped away from the winded pile of feathers, wheezing at her feet. Come on, yelled Alex, we have to get out of here. Rose was just turning for the door when she heard Aries. Grunting and struggling, he was wedged in the corner of the room, pinned between the end of the shelves and the wall, held tight. Horribly aware of the black shape stirring on the floor, Rose dived towards Aries and seized hold of his horns. She pulled, digging her heels against the floor, leaning back, straining. Alex ran round from the other side and began to push. Aries, move, he yelled. We haven't got long before she attacks again. I'm trying, squealed Aries between gasps. Rose felt as though her lungs would explode with effort. On the other side of the room, the harpy sat up unsteadily. Furiously throwing her weight backwards, Rose pulled harder still, her arm muscles burning with effort as Aries twisted and thrashed, kicking and squirming. Behind him, Alex braced his shoulder against Aries' rump and pushed his face raw with strain. Suddenly, with a loud splintering crack, the stack of shells collapsed and Aries shot forward, knocking Rose off her feet. Parcels and crates cascaded to the floor around her. Alex dragged Rose to her feet. We need to find somewhere dark to hide. Harpies can't see well in poor light. Behind them, the harpy was blinking and rising to her feet. Rose lunged out into the corridor, Alex and Aries at her heels, and hurtled towards the stairwell at the end. Throwing back the door, she glanced over her shoulder, glimpsing a scrawny yellow leg stepping out of the storeroom, and threw herself up the metal stairs, followed by the other two. Almost scrambling on all fours in her haste, she skidded out behind them into the empty great hall. A second later, the stairwell door crashed open behind them. An ear-popping caw filled the room, followed by a ferocious flapping of wings as the harpy lifted into the air, his silhouette black against the blue-grey of the glass roof. This way, shouted Alex, noticing the dingy light bathe in the glories of ancient Egypt exhibition room. Hide! With a breath scour in her lungs, Rose sped into the room, hurtling past the mummies standing either side the doorway and down the walkway made by 2 rows of tomb statues several metres high. Giant stone cats in cobra headdresses gazed impassively down as the children and Aries raced past towards the colossal statue of Akin-Ra, Lord of the Locusts, placed at the top of the rows. Chiselled from sandstone and standing over 5 metres high, Akin-Ra leaned forwards, his huge hands resting on great golden knees and desperate. Rose tucked herself behind his calves, flattening herself against the time-worn stone as Aries hunched down behind his heel. Skidding to a stop, Alex checked to see where they were hiding, before leaping behind the nearby statue of Akin-Ra's favourite pet locust, golden and leggy and over 2 metres high. Rose breathed through her mouth and listened to the wet snuffling and sort of scratchy sound that talons make against the marble floor. Edging her nose round the side of Akin-Ra's leg, she peered out to see the harpy strutting towards them, jerking her head between the statues to check if anyone was hiding. Drawing back, Rose lay her head against the cool stone, which was when she spotted the display of tomb candle lighters arranged a couple of metres away on the wall. Taking a deep breath, she leaped out, sprinted the short distance and snatched one up, actually a 3rd century BC tomb candle lighter of the Amenhotep dynasty, which to these non-archaeologists amongst you is a big pole with a sharp tip at one end. Come on, you great overgrown crow, squealed Rose, running towards the harpy, jabbing the pole in the air. Rose, no, yelled Alex, leaping from his hiding place as Rose thrust and jabbed, striking high, low, left, right. But wherever she aimed, The candlelight had bounced off the harpy's chest like a pin against a car tyre, and now, cawing wildly, the ferocious birdwoman began lifting off the ground. "Get away from her talons!" yelled Alex, throwing himself towards the harpy, reaching out for her slimy tail feathers and just missing as she swept up into the air, snatched the hood of Rose's top and yanked the girl off balance. Behind him, Ares thundered across the room, charging towards the harpy, who was now flying a metre off the ground, dragging Rose backwards. Rose struggled and punched, her trainer squealing wildly over the floor as the harpy suddenly shot upwards, just missing Ares's horns, and carried Rose into the air up over the tomb statues towards the ceiling, tight in her talons. Ares brayed furiously as Alex spun round, seized the nearest relic, a priceless tomb ornament of Neferhotep I, valued for its high craftsmanship and unusual use of 2 tones of marble, and clambered onto the locust statue for a better shot. Harpies, he knew, hunted by snatching turtles from the seashore, flying higher and higher up into the sky in order to drop them onto the rocks below, so that well, you get the picture. Horrified, he understood that the harpy intended to dispatch Rose in exactly the same way. He tried to straighten up, cursing as his feet slid over the statue's stonework, worn smooth by centuries in the desert, and realised he was too far away to make the shot. "Ares!" he yelled, "come here!" The ram pounded across and skidded to a halt as Alex leaped from the statue onto his broad back, spreading his feet for balance, teetering like a circus acrobat. Alex fixed his aim on the harpy as Ares clattered across the floor beneath her. "Take that!" he shouted, hurling the urn with all his strength. It whirled through the air and struck the side of the creature's head. Her wings jerked and collapsed, sending her toppling backwards, reeling tail over shoulder feathers as Rose vanished into a blur of black. The harpy fell, fluttering and whistling, and crashed into a heap on the floor. Leaping down from Ares' back, Alex ran across the floor. A small hand poked out through the slimy tangle, and grabbing it, he pulled Rose free and dragged her to her feet. "You all right?" he said. "Soft landing," said Rose, wiping a smear of grease from her cheek. "That was some shot." Alex shrugged and looked down at the stunned creature. "Feels funny to be attacking something that I usually look after," he said, "but then it was her or us." Ares prodded a hoof into the harpy's side, and she began to twitch and mutter. "Come on," said Alex, "we have to get out of here." Minutes later, they hurried down the front steps of the British Museum, over its courtyard and out into Great Russell Street. Alex gasped, covering his ears against the sudden thrum of traffic, and blinked, astonished by the cars and red buses rumbling past and hooting horns. Beside him, Ares buried his head in Alex's stomach, although when you're the size of an upright piano, any burying of heads is more hopeful than helpful, so that as well as being terrified, Alex was now buckled into a very uncomfortable right angle over Ares' back. "It's all right," soothed Rose, knowing that traffic was every bit as alien to Alex and Ares as that creature in the museum had been to her. Taking hold of Alex's sleeve and Ares' left horn, she wove through people who pointed and clicked Ares with their phone cameras into a back street, one of a patchwork of lanes that zigzagged quietly towards Rose's home. Today it felt safe, hidden from the London of postcards and plastic flags that she'd always felt at home in before, a London that suddenly filled with wings and talons and danger.